I think one of the biggest dysfunctions was this idea that citizens are an inconvenience to the people working in government, rather than being literally the entire reason that government exists. It was that this idea that like citizens are an inconvenience and having to serve them is like putting you out. And we really flipped that on its head. That's a big part of it, where we said they're the reason we exist. They're literally why we have the jobs we have, why we have these buildings we have, why we show up at work every day is to serve the citizens. That was a big part of it. But as I started delving into that even more, I started to look at things and realize, for example, with identity, that every one of your identity documents that you have, think about it, everything that proves you are who you are, your birth certificate, if you're married, a marriage certificate, your driver's license, your social security card, your passport, every one of those identity documents was given to you by government. And the way our system works today, government actually owns that information and they own that database because they really are the ones who created it. And if you lose any of those documents, birth certificate, marriage certificate, driver's license, passport, you have to go to a government office and ask permission to get a copy of it. That really just floored me. Also, switching modes a little bit to elections, one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that in today's world that we don't have a zero trust or a trustless way of verifying votes. So back in the day, before we had a lot of technology, the only thing we could do was just rely upon our government officials. And that's why elections are run locally. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people think maybe Washington, D.C. or your state capital runs your elections. No, in the Constitution, written into the very fabric of our founding documents, it says that elections will be local. So when you vote for president or whether you're voting for city council, the people running that election are your local election offices, usually at the county level. But it's a very local process. And that is a good thing in that the people counting your vote are people that live in your neighborhoods. Their kids go to school with your kids. These are our friends and our family and our neighbors that live in our local communities, and they run our elections. And that's fantastic, and that has worked for us for hundreds of years. But we have a technology now that allows us to be able to cast a vote in a transparent way, but still be completely anonymous, preserving your right to a secret ballot. And it's crazy to me that we don't have this huge wave of the public demanding that be how we run elections. I think, honestly, our current political dialogue is just toxic. And you can't blame just one party. It's really toxic on both sides. Interestingly, I am a registered Republican, and the hardest election I've ever been in, the most vitriolic, disgustingly lie filled, hate filled, just despicable election I've ever been in was the Republican primary election that I just won. And so there's definitely people in my own party that are divisive and just want to sling mud and spew hate. And the reason they hate me is because I will work with people of all stripes. On issues that we agree on, I will work with Democrats, I will work with Republicans, I will work with independents, I will work with whoever. If this is an issue that we agree on and that we know will better the people, then I'm going to work with others. And I got fried by the extremists in my party because of that. Now, with that said, I won with almost 2/3 of the vote. So that tells you that the vast majority of the Republicans appreciate that I'm willing to reach across the aisle and that I'm willing to work on difficult things and that I'm willing to push the envelope and adopt revolutionary technologies. But there's a fraction of them that were just horrifically awful to me because of it. I think we see the same on the other side of the aisle. I think we see the same with the Democrats. And with that said, I've got a lot of Democrats that I work very closely with when we work on issues that really matter. The reason that I am a Republican because I see in my state that Republicans are representing my values more than the other party. But I also think that politics is local because in some areas that might not be the case, right? And in some areas they're nonpartisan. Now, in my area, you're not going to get elected unless you're a Republican because there literally isn't a single elected official in my county that isn't a Republican. So luckily, I happen to align with the Republican Party here. But I have a lot of really good friends that are not Republicans that have voted for me, that have put my sign in their yard. And I can't tell you how many times I get a campaign donation and the person says, I've never in my entire life donated to a Republican. You're my first. And that's really exciting for me because what it shows me is that people are starting to look through party politics. And that's imperative. As I've gone to adopt these technologies and as I've gone to shift the paradigm of government and say, hey, you know what? The whole reason we exist is for the people. Maybe we should be serving them instead of making them drive down to our building and take a day off work to do it. Like maybe we should make it so that they can easily access the services they need online. Sometimes my biggest champions that help me get that done are Democrats, and sometimes they're unaffiliated. So one of the reasons I really support the national independent movement is because there are a lot of places that the parties have become so extreme that they don't represent the majority of the people. Keep in mind, like I said, this last election was the most vitriolic, horrible, mudslinging election I've ever been in. It was people in my own party doing it. But I won 2/3 of the vote. So there's going to be places where your party leadership on both sides of the aisle don't support you. And I think it is more important that people look at the candidates and what those candidates stand for and the issues that those candidates champion than it is the label that those candidates carry. Because I've seen opposition on both sides. I just happen to have seen more support for my ideals in my state on the Republican side. A lot of the people that are utilizing this technology don't even realize it. One example is our marriage licenses. We do all of our marriage licenses on the blockchain, and every person who gets a marriage certificate from Utah County receives a paper certificate, just like you're used to, your classic one. But we also issue them a digital certificate that is registered. It has a hash, and it's registered right now in the Ethereum blockchain. And we issue those to them and just tell them this is a digital certified copy of your marriage certificate. They don't understand the underlying technology, but what they do know is that they can have a copy of their marriage certificate on their phone that they can use to email their banks and their credit cards and the airlines so that they can change their name when they get married. Or if they need to prove their relationship status to an employer so that they can sign up for health care. They just know that they have the ability to forward this digital document to them and it works. They don't need to understand how blockchain works. They don't even need to understand what blockchain is to know that this digital document on their phone that we emailed them allows them to be able to facilitate their life a lot more easily. So that's one way you do it. The vast majority of people honestly don't care what type of technology makes their life easier. They just care that it's more convenient. So that's a big aspect of it there. The other part of it is we've started in voting utilizing blockchain technology just for people that are disenfranchised. Certain demographics of people that have had the biggest issues voting. So military members and citizens living overseas and people with disabilities. These are people that literally can't vote at the polls on election day. It's not an option for them. They're in the military. They're actively either out of state, serving at a military base, or they're overseas. Citizens living overseas who still have just as much right to vote as you or me, or people with disabilities who can't get themselves to the polls. Those are the demographics we're starting with. And what we're doing is showing people that there's no reason to disenfranchise human beings in this day and age. We have the technology to let every person exercise their constitutional right to vote and to do it with dignity. And so we're starting with people who didn't have that ability. An incremental path to adopting this technology in government is really the best way to do it anyway, because it gives us the ability to check and learn and improve each step of the way with smaller demographics. So for example, our marriage licenses. Right now, we're doing just marriage licenses in Utah County, but I could see us expanding and next moving to birth certificates and moving to death certificates and moving to other vital statistics and other vital records. But you start with one and you prove that it works, right? So for example, we've got our marriage licenses right now, but we're still having issues with two offices, the DMV and the Social Security Administration, on accepting these marriage certificates. So now we know, okay, there's an issue. So we can continue issuing digital marriage certificates and we can work on how do we solve this problem with the DMV and how do we solve this problem with the Social Security Administration. Once we've done that, then we can expand it to birth certificates, right? And the same is true with voting. You start with a small population and then you find out, is this user friendly? Is it not? How do we make it user friendly? Is this secure? Are there any issues and how do we make it more secure? And this will be a constant battle of continually improving. And then as you improve, then you adopt another demographic. Maybe it's first responders, because first responders don't always necessarily have the ability to go to the polls on election day because you never know when an emergency is going to come up. And so if we can do this in small waves and we can continually make the process more secure and more user-friendly and more transparent as we move along, then you don't really have a lot of the issues you have with broad adoption. So I don't think that coming in and changing everything to blockchain overnight is a good idea, but we need to continue to make progress.